You're beautiful, you're fierce and strong. Don't let those haters do you wrong. Look in the mirror, wipe away those tears. Pick yourself up and dust yourself off. If you wanna say it, I'm good. If you wanna feel it, I'm good. Know you got a heart of gold, you're powerful, you know it's true. Don't you know you got it? I'm good. Don't you know you're everything and more? There's only one you, only one beautiful you. Baby, you're beautiful. Baby, you're beautiful.
Hello, welcome everyone, and thank you so much for joining us. My name is Adrienne Wright, and I am the co-founder of I Will Not Be Quiet. It is so nice to be here with you this evening. It's been 4 years since a group of us gathered in the living room, feeling the reverberations of the 2016 election. And we knew that silence was not an option. We knew that the only way to combat hate and lies was to spread truth and love. And we knew that the only way to fight a political movement designed to tear people apart was to forge new connections and bring people together. So that's what we did. And I am so moved beyond words to think about what we've built in just 4 years, what you've built. When we walked out the door of our 3rd anniversary celebration last February, we never could have known that that would be the last event many of us would attend in person. Just a week or so later, the entire country shut down. And now we're used to living behind masks and screens. And yet, even as the pandemic has forced us to stay apart, it has also shown us how desperately we need each other. How we're all so delicately interconnected, how we're all living under the same sky. Just think about the moments that mattered most in 2020. Zoom birthdays and baby showers, healthcare workers sharing best practices on Twitter, activists registering voters, and protesters marching for racial justice. The common thread in all of this is community, and that's what advances progress. And that is what fills our hearts and keeps us fighting every single day. And for I Will Not Be Quiet, a group founded on the power of community, well, this was a pivotal year. We launched toolkits to give people the chance to start their own talking circle. And we saw new chapters pop up from Nashville to Portland to Kenya. We fostered candid conversations about race to identify the inward work that we needed to do to be the change that we wanted to see. And we had in-depth discussions about the pandemic's toll, issues like food security, prison reform, and paid leave for all. And we launched a nationwide voter campaign, talking to seniors in swing states to make sure that they could vote and that they could vote safely. 2020 changed how we took action, but not what we took action on, and certainly not why. Now, with 2020 behind us, we're finally breathing this sigh of relief, right? We have new vaccines and a new administration, but here's the thing. Victories are not the end, they are only the beginning. It's tempting to see this moment as a reset button, a chance to return to normal. But what is normal? The pandemic, and especially the last 4 years, exposed deeply rooted inequities in our country. And whether we like it or not, normal is working moms shouldering the burden of childcare and navigating unequal workplaces. Normal is white supremacy threatening the lives of Black Americans and hate crimes spiking against Asian Americans. And normal is homeless people dying in sub-zero temperatures on the streets of Texas, while politicians blame wind farms instead of fossil fuels. So we can't go back to normal. We've got to redefine it. And that starts where it has always started, and that's community. Opening our eyes to each other's struggles, acknowledging our shared humanity, and turning empathy and understanding into action and resistance. Whenever I join a talking circle, I am reminded of a quote from a feminist pioneer named Bell Hooks. Love is always the place where I begin and end. Love, compassion, and listening are the radical tools of advocacy. Which brings us to tonight. We have an amazing panel of activists and organizers who will share how they've harnessed these tools to create change. We'll learn about ways to build bridges with other activists and strategies for organizing around the issues we care about. And because this is not just a call to action, this is a celebration, we will have a front row seat to see some really, really incredible music. Now, we have a very, very special guest that I will be introducing in just a moment. She is phenomenal, and she is joining us again after a fantastic panel last year. Please join me in welcoming activist, author, and co-creator of Black Lives Matter, Alicia Garza.
Yay. Hi. Thank you so much, Adrienne. It's so good to be with you. And it's wonderful to be with the audience here tonight. My name is Alicia Garza. I'm the principal at the Black Futures Lab and the Black to the Future Action Fund. And tonight I want to talk about why it's important for us to redefine normal. You know, Adrienne reached out to me a few months ago now, actually, because an article that I had written for Marie Claire really pushed this point home. What does it mean to go back to normal when normal itself was not good for a lot of us? You know, I really wanted to make the point in writing that article that we have to have clear eyes as we're moving into this moment of opportunity. In the last year, millions more people engaged in the process of making decisions about us, with us, for us. We took risks in the middle of a global pandemic, in the middle of deep insecurity in all kinds of areas, to make sure that we brought our protests to the polls and made sure that we changed the course of history, because frankly, we were careening off a cliff. But that's not all the work that needed to be done. And if there's anything that we can learn from election cycles past, it's that we lose the most when we motivate and mobilize in incredible numbers to change the course of history, and then we drop the ball in the middle of the field. My plea to you tonight is to make sure that you don't think that we've gone back to normal because we have removed a white supremacist from the White House, because we have changed the balance of power in Congress. Our work is not finished. In fact, it's just beginning. We are now taking on the task of making real our promise to ensure a multiracial democracy, a democracy where women's lives are respected, where the lives of Black people and Latinx people and Indigenous people are respected, where Asian communities do not face violence walking to work in the middle of the day. We are trying to build the kind of democracy where every single one of us has a say over the decisions that are being made about us. We're trying to build a democracy that can withstand the pressures that it is being tested by. We all saw the pressures on January 6th, where a small group of people tried to overturn the United States government because they were angry about the progress that we are making. They are angry about us trying to change the course of history. We will not be silent. We will not be turned around, but that requires that we're not tired in this moment. Drink your water, do your stretches, lift your weights, do whatever you've got to do, because we need all hands on deck to take on the project of our generation, which is transforming the way that our country functions so that there can be a normal, and that normal is a baseline for basic dignity, rights, and respect for everyone. A baseline where we understand that we depend on each other to survive, and that dependence can be parasitic or it can be cooperative and interdependent. We're trying to build the kind of normal where climate catastrophes don't shape our lives. We are trying to build the kind of normal where our life expectancy and our quality of life can be good again. America has never reached the promise that it has offered ever since its inception. But that task is in front of us right now. And so I'm excited for the events tonight. You have a bunch of great people who are going to talk to you and with you about what it means to redefine normal. Some of these people are some of my closest friends and the people who I would follow in any storm to get us out of crisis. I so appreciate you coming tonight and having me speak. And I hope that you have a robust conversation this evening about what it means to transform into the country we've always said that we were. Thank you so much. Back to you, Adrienne.
Thank you so much, Alicia. It is so great to have you here. I'd love for us to shift over to our next performer. Her name is Allison Russell. Allison?
Hello, friends. Thank you so much, Alicia Garza, for your time and your generosity, your wisdom with all of us tonight. I am deeply inspired by the work that you're engaged in. Grateful to you and to Patrice and Opal for catalyzing the Black Lives Matter movement, which is such a healing, paradigm-shifting movement. And I'm really proud to be here tonight with all of you in this magic circle, trying to redefine normal with intention, without bigotry, without abuse, creating a better present and future for ourselves and the generations to come. My name is Allison Russell. I'm a musician, I'm a mother, I'm a writer, and I aspire to be a good ancestor one day. And this song that I'm going to play for you, I wrote for one of the great grand matriarchs of my paternal line, a woman named Kashiba, who was born and who died enslaved. But because of her strength and resilience, I get to be here today. My daughter gets to be here today, and we're standing on her shoulders. And it's our work to improve things, to leave things a little better than we found them. So for Kashiba, for all of the ancestors whose shoulders we stand on. Kashiba, Kashiba, you feel, how does your spirit fly? Blood of your blood, bone of your bone, by the grace of your strength, we have life. From the golden coast of Ghana to the bondage of Grenada, you kept the dream of hope alive. They burned your body, they cursed your blackness, but they could not take your light. Kashiba, Kashiba, you feel now, how does your spirit fly? Blood of your blood, bone of your bone, by the grace of your strength, we have life. Raped and beaten, your baby's taken. Sold and starved and sold again. But ain't you a man of love deserving? Ain't it something you survive? Kashiba, Kashiba, you feel now, how does your spirit fly? Blood of your blood, dreamt of home, you dreamt of freedom. You died a slave, you died alone. But you came from warriors who once built empires. And Shanti's kingdom carries on. Kashiba, Kashiba, you're free now, you're free now. How does your spirit fly? Blood of your blood, bone of your bone, by the grace of your strength, we have life. You were forgotten, almost forsaken. But your children found it, generations. Your strength sustained them. They won their freedom. Trace their roots to find you waiting. Kashiba, Kashiba, you're free now, you're free now. How does your spirit fly? Blood on blood, bone on bone, by the grace of your strength, we have life. Kashiba, Kashiba, you're free now, you're free now. How far your spirit's fly. Blood on blood, bone on bone, by the grace of your strength, we are home. By the grace of your strength, we are home. We are home. We are home. We are home. Thank you so much. And I just want to say a very, very big thanks to Adrian and I Will Not Be Quiet for bringing us all together tonight, for inviting me into this magic circle. I am very, very proud to be virtually standing shoulder to shoulder with all of you. And I wish you so much love, strength, resilience, persistence. And we are going to get to the other side of this, and we are going to build together a better normal, redefining it. The old normal is nothing we want to go back to. So thank you so much for having me here tonight. Many blessings, y'all.
Hi, I'm Elizabeth Seagren. I am a senior staff writer at Fast Company magazine. I'm the author of a recent book called The Rocket Years, How Your 20s Launched the Rest of Your Life. And before that, I received my PhD from Berkeley in Women's Studies. And I cannot tell you how excited and honored I am to be moderating this conversation with 4 remarkable activists that really inspire me. I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, but just to contextualize this conversation, I just wanted to share a little bit about my own experiences this year. The last 4 years have been incredibly stressful for all of us. And then we had a pandemic to boot. And I started this year so excited and so happy to be turning over a new leaf. And in the middle of January, I crashed. I had a moment where it just seemed like all of this hope I had for a completely different world had crumbled. And I just began feeling tired and a little bit depressed and just frustrated that after everything we had been through, the world hadn't changed. The year started with an insurrection. White supremacy was rearing its head. And so I'm really looking forward to having this conversation because I think the message that I got, through going through that was that, we're not looking for normal. We're looking for something better than normal. And I can't wait to have a conversation about what that can look like and how we can work towards it, and how we can take care of ourselves so that we can build that future that we're looking to create together. And the four amazing women who will be helping us think through these issues are, to start with, Ai-jen Poo. She is an award-winning organizer. She's the founder and executive director of the National Domestic Workers Alliance, as well as the director of Caring Across Generations. And she's really a leading voice in the women's movement. And then we have Jamira Burley, who has been an activist since she was 15 years old and fighting against gun violence, which had affected her own family. And from that tender age, she's done so many different things, and she's been recognized by the Obama White House as a champion for change. And she's also a social impact strategist that thinks particularly about the next generation. Then we have Monica Ramirez, who is the founder and president of Justice for Migrant Women. She has done so much in her career, but one thing that you may have heard of recently was she wrote, she created the Dear Sisters letter, in which she brought together the voices of 700,000 farm worker women, and had a letter in which they were talking to in Hollywood, and that basically kickstarted the Time's Up movement. And so I can't wait to hear about how she's continuing to work on that. And then we have Alencia Johnson, who is the founder and chief impact officer of 1063 West Broad, which is a social impact agency. And she has worked closely and advised the Obama, Warren, and Biden presidential campaigns. And so I am so thrilled to be here with all of you today. To start with, I just want to hear how you're doing. How are you feeling right now? What's going through your mind? Ai-jen, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Well, I'm super excited to be with this amazing circle of women who I love and respect so much. Hi, I love you. And today's actually a really special day. Virginia just passed a domestic workers' Bill of Rights, the first state in the South to pass a Bill of Rights for domestic workers. And it's such a big deal for the 65,000 women, mostly women of color, who work inside of our homes, doing the work that we've always known is essential, the work that makes all other work possible, but has never really been recognized as such. And so this is Virginia recognizing the work. It's a huge deal. And I just wanted to bring that forward because I'm celebrating tonight.
Yeah, for sure. And Alencia, how has the year started for you, and how are you feeling right now?
Well, as a native Virginian and someone who lives in Virginia and sits on the Virginia Council of Women, like, it is huge what just happened, along with some of the other amazing progressive issues that have been passed, like repealing the death penalty, so many issues. This year, I will say, after I hit the pandemic wall, after the election, I kind of got a second wind of, okay, we're here, as women of color do. We're like, how do we harness this for greater good? I have been, at the beginning of the year, was a little frustrated, of course, disheartened by the insurrection, but really frustrated with not just conservatives, but also white people who tend to say that they are allies with us, wanting us to move on from what happened January 6th. And I actually was on MSNBC a few weeks ago talking about that, the day after the decision to acquit former President Donald Trump came out. And I was the only Black person on the panel, and everyone was saying it's time to move on. The Biden administration has so much to get done. They do, but when white supremacy has created our culture this way and been normalized, you can't you can't bring about economic recovery or recovery for healthcare or whatever it may be without rooting out white supremacy, because that is so interconnected with all of our rights. And so I am in a place of frustration and I'm a bit anxious about people wanting to just move on because Trump is out, when the reality is this is when those of us on the screen have to double down and get people to continue to understand what is happening and what is not happening. I mean, we are hearing people walking back their promises on student debt cancellation and so many more. The list could go on and on and on. And so I'm frustrated and anxious right now, but have a second wind in the second year of the pandemic where I'm ready to fight even harder.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting because, we're all in this circle, and I think more broadly, many of us are fighting for the same goals, but we're also at slightly different points emotionally. And I think that's so interesting, and it's something we should be talking about, right? Because when one of us is having our total meltdown, which was me a few weeks ago, we need other people to be stepping up at those moments, and vice versa. Monica, tell us what you're thinking about right now, and how you're thinking about this year.
Thank you. Well, first, just really honored to be here with all of you. Jen, congrats, wonderful news. Have been really inspired, just being in the space for the last 20 minutes we've been here, and always by all of your work. So how am I feeling? I actually have been feeling really tired today. I think that sometimes when we talk about our work and sort of the struggles and the successes, sometimes people think that we don't get tired. And I think that, like Valencia was saying, we have to talk about what's real. And the real is that sometimes we have down days and sometimes we are tired and sometimes we wonder whether or not we is pivoting enough. And so today was one of those days for me because I was thinking a lot about what's needed at the border, and was in communication with about some of the things that are needed for some of the families who are living in the tent cities and just had to withstand the cold south of the border. And so, those things situations like that always make me think a lot about what do we need to do to get through today, but then also how is this contributing to the long game, and how do we actually position ourselves so that we can lean on one another so that we can get through what we need to get through now, but so that we can play the long game, because so often when you're having things thrown at you all the time from different directions that are completely unexpected, it's difficult to feel stable or secure. And so today I was feeling that way, and I'm really happy to be able to share this space because it's a grounding space and it's a reminder of the fact that we've come a long way and we do have a lot of work left to do, but we've got each other in it, and that gives me a lot of hope.
Yeah, and I think that just the fact that we're here and that Adrienne has co-founded this organization that allows us to sort of sit with each other and take a moment to sort of check in with each other. I think that that's just so valuable. Jamira, tell us a little bit about where you are now in your thinking and in your activism as you're thinking about this year.
Well, I'm definitely happy this question came not this morning because I was definitely in a different mindset. But first of all, I want to say thank you for including me in this event. It's an honor to be surrounded by so many of my sheroes. And I think that's one of the awesome things about COVID is that it's allowed us to meet people that we've admired for so long. But what I will say is that, in two things. One is that every time someone tells me that I'm feeling tired or that I'm emotionally drained, I feel like I'm constantly screaming to folks that it's a pandemic and we are almost being forced to live within this idea that being in a global pandemic is normal, being in isolation is normal, and it's not. And so I think we all need to kind of allow ourselves the grace and the patience, which I constantly remind myself every day that it's okay to be sad and frustrated. And secondly, to Alencia's point is we all come from communities where, over the last few months, we had to pull and beg and convince and really drive and motivate and encourage people to show up in communities that did not want to show up, in communities that have long since lost their faith in the political process. And I think what has now happened since the election for many folks is a disappointment. And so every day I'm trying to find the motivation to remind folks that we still have an opportunity to push this administration in the right direction. But it's twofold. The administration has to work with us and pull and push because people are suffering, people are dying, people, I think if things don't turn out in a direction in which people feel like there's a voice for them in Washington, I don't know how much pulling and pushing and inspiring we can do in 2 years that will get people to return to the polls.
Yeah, and this really it's a perfect segue into the next set of questions that I have about this issue of what it means to redefine normal. But I think before we jump into that, I know that there are a lot of people who are tuning in right now who are aspiring activists who are just really inspired by the work that all of you have done over the course of your careers. And so I would just love to hear a little bit about how you got started on this journey. And then we'll talk a little bit about how your thinking has changed over the last 4 years. But you know, Jamira, do you want to kick us off on this? You've been doing this for a long time, even though you're so young. So tell us a little bit about your journey.
Yeah, I'm ready to retire, especially when I see all of these dope young people out here just doing the work. I'm like, yes, now I can leave. But I got involved very abruptly, right? The way I didn't decide to be an activist because it was cool, it was sexy. I did it as a survival mechanism. I grew up in a community in West Philadelphia, and I grew up in the aftermath of the war on drugs and the crack epidemic, in a community that very much felt a sense of hopelessness, where people, you know, attended more funerals and graduations. And in 2005 was a pivotal moment for me, where my 20-year-old brother Andre was shot and killed. And it was also the year that my father was convicted of murder. So I lived at a weird juxtaposition of knowing both a victim and a perpetrator. And really, I started my activism out asking the question of, what about our society cultivate these types of environments where people feel the need to use violence or end up becoming a victim of violence? And how can I, as a young person, help to transform that? And so I started off kind of training high school students how to be violence interrupters. And through that process, realizing that violence and criminal justice reform, or mass incarceration, I should say, are the public faces of much deeper systematic problems. And because of that, my work has really morphed into, you know, what are the deeper systematic problems, and how can we equip young people with the tools and resources that they need to create the change that they want in their own communities, without waiting for someone else, waiting for a politician to do and say things that will benefit their communities overall.
Yeah, and I think that's such an inspiring story for all of the young people who are tuning in right now, because sometimes it just takes being interested in this issue and wanting to do something about it to kickstart a lifelong passion for this particular issue. Yeah. Find your calling. Monica, tell us a little bit about how you got started. I mean, you've been doing this for a long time now, and you've done all of these really exciting initiatives that a lot of us have heard about. But tell us how all this started. Tell us about the seeds that began all of this work.
Well, quite appropriate with the question about the seeds, because, you know, I come from a migrant farm worker family, and I feel like, you know, I do, my work is my life, you know, in that I have been raised to understand the needs of the farm worker community, because I come from the farm worker community. And so from a really young age, had the good fortune of having parents who talked to myself and my siblings about the reality that farm workers in our country experienced then when they were working in the fields, and still, unfortunately, today, those circumstances exist. So I just got started young because of my parents. But, you know, I think when I was a teenager, I was of the belief that if I could just teach people in my community about us, about farm workers, about, you know, the Latinx community, which of course at that time we didn't use the term Latinx, but if we could just teach people in our community about us, that maybe then the treatment would get better. And, you know, and so that was really how I started doing work in my community, to try to educate people about our community and our needs. And, you know, maybe that was naive, but I still carry that with me, because I do believe that if we can just teach people and have conversations and show people how we are the same and what we want in the world, that we can be working toward together, that we actually can make great change. So, you know, I started very young and haven't stopped. But I also think that when we talk about activism, people think of activism as something that you have to be trained a certain way to do, or that you have to, receive certain kinds of skill building exercises. And I think that for me and for those who I know who are called activists or consider themselves activists, I think we're just living the best way that we can and fighting for things that we deeply care about and hoping that that will result in making change for the better.
Yeah, and the theme is that this is an expression of you and in your identity and in the way that you see the world. And I think that that's something so powerful because that's what we're all looking for, right? We're trying to figure out what it is that who we are and what really matters to us, so that we can go into the world and do that. Ai-jen, would you tell us a little bit more about what has helped you shape a career working through all of these different things, from elder care to domestic work to supporting domestic workers? Tell us a little bit about how you got involved in all of that.
I would say probably it has a lot to do with being raised by my mom and my grandmother, really, really strong women who I just thought walked on water as a kid. They did everything. They took care of us. They worked. They took care of the community. They powered everything in my life and everything around me. And so I think as a kid, I just assumed that if women are kind of doing everything and powering everything, then they must be in charge of everything. And I think growing up, I learned very quickly that that's actually not the case, that yes, we are doing everything, but we're definitely not in charge of everything. And I think that disconnect is something that just kind of fueled my interest in organizing with women. And I never thought that I would be an organizer my whole life. I kind of just followed the women, especially the women who inspire me. And I don't know how many of you have kids and have seen this movie Frozen 2, but there's a song in it. When you don't know what to do next, you just take the next best step. And I don't even know if it's that I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I just kind of followed women who inspired me with their courage and their resilience, and just kept organizing.
I think one lesson that I'm getting from that is also that that activism is not a simple predefined path, right? In some ways, any activist is going to have to sort of shape their own path, and you sort of have to be comfortable with that. There's no org chart, and there's no simple moving to the next level of activist manager. And so I love that you have complete sort of control in that sense. Alencia, I think that what you do is so interesting because you're an activist, but you're also kind of an entrepreneur. Like, you've created your own social impact agency, and you have used your work to advise presidents. So tell me a little bit about that, about how you got involved in activism and how that activism manifests.
Yeah, I every time I get this question, I'm like, I don't have like a specific moment that shifted my life. It was the fact that growing up, like Ai-jen, whole bunch of powerful women in my family, like all these women, my mom, my aunts, my cousins, and my dad. Like, all of the women were leading. And I grew up in the church. My dad's a pastor, and the Black church was the foundation of my faith, but also the foundation of my culture and social justice. And there's a special relationship that Black people have with the Black church. And I always felt this innate great responsibility to use whatever position that you are in, whatever room that you're in, whatever microphone you might have, or whatever opportunity you have, no matter what it is, you are supposed to speak up and use that. And much like Monica said, I felt very early on in high school too, that if more people who looked like me saw other people who looked like us doing this work, whether talking about civic engagement, whether in the community, they would be invested too. I didn't want to be the only Black girl in my town who loved going to the voting booth with my parents or, standing up for a certain issue. I grew up in a predominantly white community. And so it was part of I believe, my purpose to make sure that representation was there and visible. And it has been kind of the thread through of like my narrative work that I do across industries of, most of the time, it's not necessarily the message, it's the messenger. We know that someone that we love and appreciate could say something, but a politician, but if, our trusted hair salon stylist or someone from the community said it and understood it, we would engage differently. And I think that shows you what we're all talking about here of how activism doesn't always look like, people leading, thousands of people descending on a state capitol, which these women have done, right? It looks like what you're doing every single day with your voice and your opportunity. And that's kind of the work that I'm doing with like corporations and brands. I know Jamira does this kind of stuff too. Tell them you have a significant influence to shift our culture and the perception that people have on critical issues, and you have a responsibility. And so how are you doing that? And so I think for me, it is imperative that we all realize we have responsibility, and we all, so long as we can speak and communicate, we all can actually contribute to this. And sometimes that is literally just sharing a perspective that is different for so many folks, right? And the amount of times I've been in rooms where I've shared an experience that, not even as a Black woman, but an experience from someone being in the South or just someone who thinks differently, it really shifts culture. I will say too, I spent 6 years working at Planned Parenthood, and I actually kind of fell into that job. I didn't really want to work at Planned Parenthood, mainly because the perception at the time for me, it was that, this is this white ladies organization. There's no framework for women of color who I am committed to reproductive justice. It is the core of the work that I do, I think. But I also realized this can't shift until more women of color engage from the inside out. And the conversations for those years that I was there that we would have and pushing and challenging the organization from the inside and out is really making that institution better for so many. And I think that that's an example of us deciding the fight that we're going to take on, and how important it is for our communities to be that representation in institutions that are so powerful.
Yeah, and so I think that really brings us beautifully to the big question of tonight, which is redefining normal. So I love that you've all shared some context about where you've come from. My question is, so how, you've been at this for a long time. How has the last 4 years shifted your priorities, and what should we be thinking about doing now? I'm going to it's a tough question, and it's a two-part question. So the last 4 years and now. Jamira, do you want to kick us off on that one?
How did I get chosen first? No. I will say I'm actually happy to be chosen first because, that enables for me to potentially not have to repeat anyone else. But, to be absolutely honest, I became more radicalized over the last 4 years. I am much more now committed to the idea that we do not have to work within the traditional institutions of power to see the type of change for the communities we come from that we need. 4 years ago, I was like, I want to work within institutions, I want to work within systems. And a part of me is like, let's burn it all down. Like, none of it has ever worked for us. Our communities are still suffering. And so for me, what the last 4 years have taught me is that, institutions are not always the answer, and that is in allowing for individual people to really start seeing the intersectionality of all of our issues, I think is inspiring. And I think for us to move forward in a way that is conducive to, justice and liberty and freedom, it requires for us to look not at any party as a savior, as any individual as a savior, but really it requires each and every one of us to push and pull in our government and to do better and be better, and not assume that the traditional solutions that have been given us to us in the past is something that we have to accept in order for us to achieve the type of world in which we all deserve.
Yeah, for sure. And radicalizing, I mean, that's kind of an empowering emotion in some ways, right? And I think the struggle now is it was such heightened emotions for 4 years, right? And so I think the part of the struggle now is how do we tune that into something that is sort of sustainable for the decade that, to come as we're continuing to work on this, because it seemed like we were in an emergency, right, the last 4 years, and now, at least my experience is that, like, okay, well, the emergency is not it's not present, but somehow the anxieties are still there, and what do we do about that?
But I would actually disagree. The emergency is there. It just doesn't feel as urgent because we don't have an orange man kind of screaming at us from the White House, right? But the urgency, people are still separated at the borders. Like, people are still locked in cages. Kids still don't have any food to eat. And so I guess the new normal has to be for us to say that the urgency still exists, even though we got who we wanted into office.
Yeah.
Right? We now get them to do the job.
Yes, exactly. Yes, a very, very good point. And actually, to that point, Monica, can you tell us a little bit about, the last 4 years have been extremely traumatic for migrant communities. So tell me a little bit about how you experienced all of that and what we should be doing right now.
I mean, the last 4 years have been extremely traumatic, but, I come back to the fact over and over again that, when you look at farm workers, when you look at other migrant people, farm workers have been denied basic rights for over 80 years, and that hasn't changed. It's just now we see plainly, we see clearly, we understand exactly what people who don't like us, who would rather us not be here, are thinking and feeling, because they're actually saying it out loud. And so I feel like we always understood that there was a threat, and we always understood that what some people called normal was never normal, because oppressing people and denying people basic rights is not normal. I feel like we always knew that. But now we see it very clearly, and people have not been shy about making their feelings known. And in some ways, I feel as though the last 4 years has allowed us the kind of clarity that is needed for us to be able to build the strategies and solutions to win. And because we know what we're up against, we understand what the threats are, and we also know who our allies are and how we're going to be able to move together to make change. And, I've been thinking a lot about, people always say, that I fight for equality, or they say I fight for equity. And I've been thinking about this lately, and I've been thinking, when we say we fight for equity, that means we're saying that we want people to have equal rights under the law. But when the law itself is unjust, when we say we're fighting for equity, or, for equitable conditions, that's not enough. We're fighting for liberation, right? We're fighting to make sure that we are all treated with respect and dignity. And so I think that now is understanding in plain language, seeing clearly what the threats are. How will we continue to organize, across movements amongst ourselves, so that we can actually see liberation, not just equality and not just equity.
Amen. Yeah, and I think there's also some relief in a way in having the issues be evident to everybody rather than just one community, right? I think that happened over the last 4 years. Alencia, tell me a little bit about how the last 4 years have changed your perspective and what we should be doing now.
Yeah, I have very much like Jamira. I don't say like I've become radicalized. I've just become more unapologetically myself, and you're going to take it or leave it. And that's probably why I am now an entrepreneur, because of how the experience that, women of color have in institutions, even the ones that are supposed to be for us, right? And that's, to what Monica is saying, that this, we're going to always have to fight against something, right? And change the laws and change all this. And so I think that what has also happened over these past 4 years is this understanding of how more people are understanding how politics are local, how organizing is local, right? Because when you had what was happening in the White House, then people were literally counting on the courts and also their state legislatures, their city councils. And now in the reverse, when we're not getting what we have been promised in the federal government, iGen opened up with the win here in Virginia. And so how important these local races and these local movements are. And I am hoping that those of you watching and attending are going to get involved in your local community. You don't have to run for office. You don't have to lead, an organization, but you need to pay attention to the issues that are there. And one really tangible thing I would love for folks to do is there's this Instagram account, So You Want to Know About, that does a really good job of explaining, I believe that's it. I can put it up in my social media afterwards, but it does a really good job of explaining issues that a lot of people aren't paying attention to if they're not in the work, issues that MSNBC is not going to cover when they're covering Tiger Woods for like 4 or 5 hours, but we need to be talking about these nominees that need to be confirmed. You need to really be aware of what's happening under the radar, because when you're not, in 2-3 years, when you look up and a right that you thought was so secured is no longer there, it's because you weren't paying attention, right? And that is done intentionally and on purpose by the people and institutions in power. And it's on us to really make sure that we are informed in all of those issues, and not just the issues, to what Monica was saying, not just the issues that directly impact us, but intersectionally. Because my liberation is tied to everyone else's liberation as well. And no one can get free until we're all free. And so we must really be laser focused on continuing to beat the drum, continue to have this urgency of now, and paying attention to what's happening right around us.
And Ai-jen, you get to close us off in terms of this concept of redefining normal. And then we're going to move into a Q&A. But I would just love to hear, what does redefining normal mean to you, and what should we be working on now?
Before there was a pandemic, there was an epidemic of low-wage work in our country, where we had so many people who were working so hard and still couldn't make ends meet, like literally couldn't pay the bills, couldn't keep their families healthy. And there was an epidemic of mass incarceration and deep inequities in our healthcare system and in so many of our systems. And I think that we needed a massive disruption in the way that we live, work, and care in this country in order to shake out of the incredibly entrenched dynamics that we had understood to be normal. And now we have experienced a year and maybe even 4 years of insane disruption to the way that we live, work, and care. And it is probably the biggest opportunity, certainly of my lifetime, maybe in generations, for us to create a new normal. And it can be a deep shift, because I think we see now so much. So many more of us see so many more changes that need to be made. And it makes me incredibly hopeful. And I think we can change everything from the quality of jobs and work and the dignity of work in this country to criminal justice or injustice, and how we care for our families, childcare, paid leave, long-term care. Like, there's so many pieces of our world that can be shifted coming out of this time of crisis and disruption. And it's really up to us, like all of us, to engage and to make it real, to pay attention, to stay engaged, like Valencia was talking about, to organize locally, to do all the things in the way that we feel comfortable, and also doing it in a relay, because I know that we'll get tired. And there's this, our friend Rashad Robinson often talks about the fact that there's going to be some of us who are just really tired and need a break. There's going to be some of us who are really traumatized and actually need to heal. Mm-hmm. And then there's going to be some of us who are fired up and ready to go, like want to do more, want to step up their leadership, run for office. And we just have to create room to support all of those ways of being, so that we can stay in this work together and create a new normal coming out of this time of crisis.
I love that, and that's a beautiful way to cap off this section. And yeah, I mean, we've all lost so much, over the last year, last 4 years, but particularly the last year. And it's incumbent on us to not let it all be wasted, right? And to allow us to sort of use this to bring about some good. And that's something that we can do. It's in our control. I love that message. So we have some audience questions now, and they're going to appear on the screen. So Naomi wants to know, what are any of the specific resources, people, accounts, groups that have really inspired you in the last few months? So anybody can take that one away. Alencia just shared one. Do any of you have any like top resources that you would recommend to the rest of us?
Top resources, people, accounts, groups. Yeah, I mean, it depends. So if you want to run for something, there's an organization called Run for Something. If you want to become a better ally, there's a really great book called The Black Friend that just came out by Frederick Joseph. If you want to learn more about, or if you want to follow folks who are doing the work, this great panel all share resources every single day on their account. So yeah, what I will say now, very similar to what has been said, is that unlike any moment in history, there is a plethora of information and people who are doing this work, and a simple Google search will bring up dozens and dozens of books and organizations that are out there.
That's awesome.
Oh,
go ahead. Oh, sorry, Aiden, go ahead.
That's okay. I'll just add one quick thing, which is that there's a whole bunch of organizations that care about childcare, paid leave, and long-term care, especially in the home and community, who are working together to make real President Biden and Vice President Harris's commitment to really investing in the care economy as a part of our economic recovery strategy. And for those of you who care about those issues, like, now is the time to call your member of Congress to make sure that caregiving is front and center in the rescue package and in the upcoming recovery package. And if you want to stay plugged in, a group called Caring Across Generations at caringacross.org, now is the time.
Yeah, and I'll just add on that, a campaign that both Aiden and I are part of through our organizations is a national essential worker campaign that many orgs have come together to create. And I think it's important that people follow along with what's happening with that campaign, because for the past year, we've heard about how certain workers across different industries are essential, but unfortunately, many of these workers continue to be treated as if they're disposable. And so we need to make sure that the way people, in particular political leaders, are talking about workers and people, that their actions in supporting them match. So I would highly recommend that folks follow the National Essential Worker Campaign and find out ways that you can support the frontline workers in your community, because we need to make sure that there is real change when we come out of this pandemic for these workers and for all workers.
And can I add just really quickly, I want to add the news source that is really talking about these issues from our lens is this new news source called the 19th News. They're doing a really good job of having women-run media talking about the issues as it relates to gender in a really intersectional way. It's a great resource for you all.
That was a really great question to end on, because I think now people can go off and and do their Google searches and look for all of these resources. But on that note, I just want to thank all of you for sharing so much of yourself and so much of your time with us tonight. This was a wonderful conversation. I feel better just being part of a community. I think that that's really a wonderful feeling, that we're not in this alone and that we are in this relay, as you're saying, and we can count on one another on this journey. So thank all of you for being here, and I can't wait to see what comes in the next few years.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Wow. Thank you so much to everyone who has attended our celebration today. I'm so grateful to each and every one of you. The audience members, the speakers, the performers, for making this event a success. Listening to your experiences, it really does give me hope. It's a reminder that when we come together and when we show up for each other, the power of everyday people becomes unstoppable. And that when we come together at work, at home, in our community, the more the things that we deserve in life will actually come true. You are not alone. So whether you've been an activist your whole life or this is your kind of first taste of it, welcome. Come to community spaces like I Will Not Be Quiet. This is where you can take your next step. And if you don't have an I Will Not Be Quiet chapter in your community, you can always start one. After all, I Will Not Be Quiet began with a conversation between two friends. And as we often say, what starts in the living room can indeed end up in Congress. So it's no secret that we've got bold plans for the future. Moving forward, we will have deeper conversations and more thoughtful opportunities for action. We will invest in organizers who work with us because they're giving us valuable tools for redefining normal in our communities. And as Margaret Mead said, never doubt the small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. Now, I would like to take a moment to celebrate this group of thoughtful, committed individuals. Wherever you're joining us, grab a glass, grab a mug, grab your water bottle, and let's toast to redefining normal. To building a community rooted in love and learning, and to changing the world one person, one living room at a time. Cheers to all of you. Thank you all so much for joining us. With that, I'm excited to introduce our final performer of the night. If you're still with us, someone who uses music as a tool for social justice. Her song Quiet was Billboard's #1 protest song in 2017 and featured on NPR's American Anthems. Please join me in welcoming Milk.
Hi, everyone. I'm Connie Lim. I perform under the artist name Milk, and I'm stoked to be a part of this incredibly special event. I think one of the more valuable things about this song for me personally as an artist is that it helped confirm that my individual story matters. And so I hope that when you listen, you can hear yourself within the story, within the song, and also you can take a moment to honor your own journey and where you're headed and the things that you want to say. Perhaps you can start thinking about or feeling out what you can't keep quiet about. This song is called Quiet. Put on your face, know your place, shut up and smile, don't spread your legs. I could do that, but no one knows me, no one ever will. If I don't say something, if I just lie still, they may see a monster, they may run away. If I let them hear what I have to say, I can't keep quiet, no, I can't keep quiet, no, one woman riot, I can't keep quiet for anyone, no, not anymore. 'Cause no one knows me, no one ever will. If I don't say something, take that dry blue pill, they may see that monster, they may run away. But I have to do this, I can't keep quiet. No, I can't keep quiet. No,
keep